What is going on, everybody, and welcome to the Tuesday edition of the Stochastic NHL Strategy Show. I'm your host, Josh Harris. We are chilling in my basement again. Had to cancel my help. We have some illness running through the house, so need my little fellow to go run around. So sorry for the glare behind me, but this was the best case scenario in terms of the angle. Joining me to break down this 8-game slate, rocking his Habs gear, Slim Cliffy. What's going on?
Not a whole lot. Kind of excited for this 8-gamer. It's a big night on DK here tonight with the spin going. Some interesting matchups on the board here. Interesting slate. I say interesting slate last night. You had Detroit or you didn't. Detroit didn't look very good for most of that game, but that's what happens when you have some high-skill players. Sometimes they can just kind of will you to a win, and they did that against Los Angeles. I game stacked San Jose, Pittsburgh, and stayed up to watch that game. It's like top 5 worst decisions I made in the last 18 months. So won't be doing that again. But 8 games here tonight. Obviously, there's one massive favorite. Chicago is at Tampa Bay tonight. We'll definitely be talking about that later. But, we have Carolina on the board here tonight, obviously with Mikko Rantanen in the lineup. We have Colorado on the board here tonight with Martin Necas in the lineup. So moving parts, Seattle played last night, which means Philip Grubauer night, baby. Lots of interesting games here besides that massive favorite in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, Detroit really didn't look that good, but they took advantage of some Kings mistakes. Like, obviously, the Kings went down on a 5-on-3, gave up a goal. Mike Anderson had a bad pinch. Detroit took it the other way, 2-on-1, scored. There was a bad defensive zone turnover, scored. So, that easily could have been the Kings game, but Detroit capitalized on their mistakes, and that's the way it goes. I fell asleep before the end of that game. That's a win after waking up and seeing the box scores, but also woke up and noticed that at 7 a.m. Eastern time, there was like 98 spots left in the spin. That filled before 9 a.m. The second iteration of it is over half full already. They kind of screwed the pooch there, but there's nothing we can do about it. There's no point in yelling about it because they're not listening anyway. So let's get into this slate. Before we do, just wanted to say thank you guys for joining us here on this Tuesday afternoon, wherever you are in the world. And if you do want to go premium, you can click the link in the chat and use promo code Stochastic15. That'll get you 15% off your first week or month of any subscription. Let's get into this slate. First game of the night, Boston Bruins with a 3 total heading into Buffalo. The Sabres also have a 3 total. Looks like Boston's going to be missing Brandon Carlo tonight. They're already missing Charlie McAvoy and one other defenseman that is escaping my memory at the current
Lindholm.
Hampus Lindholm. I wish they were missing Hampus Lindholm, but he's down on the third line. Boston going Pastrnak, Geekie, Zaka, Marchand, Coyle, Potois. I know I butchered that, but I like saying French words because I can't speak it like a French. Lindholm, Letary, Frederick. On the Buffalo side, it's Thompson, Peterka, Kulik, Tuck, Zucker, Cousins, Quinn, McLeod, Benson. Now, we're getting a new update as we speak for the ownership because our chiseled chin boss, Jake Hari, put in the wrong Tampa line, so we're currently getting that updated, but I will let you know what the ownership is here. I'm going to start on the Buffalo side. If you need a filler, I don't mind Quinn, McLeod, Benson at 10.5. They're coming in under 1%. Like, there's a line in a later game that's the same price that's coming in at like 20%-ish. So I don't mind that. But for me, really, it's the top line of Thompson, Peterka, Kulich. One, like the Tuck, Zucker, Cousins line is more expensive, and they haven't been great. This line with Kulich actually has been really good. He's been good wherever he plays. Moving Thompson to the wing, I think, has helped him This line has a smallish sample, but they are very high event. They are controlling the play despite being very high event. And that Boston top line, they're not anything to be feared on either end, really. And especially without these blue liners and Swayman struggling, this Buffalo top line is interesting. It's 16,900 coming in after top 2 stack percentage. I think I prefer them to stacking Boston one. I'll get to them in a second. You get Peterka and Thompson on the top unit. For 16-9, the amount they play, the matchup, Boston missing their defenders, I actually don't mind them at all. So I prefer them to the tuck line. If you need a filler for expensive stuff, don't mind like a 2-man and McLeod Quinn or something like that. McLeod's generally been decent up and down the lineup. On the Boston side, Pastrnak, Geeky, Zaka coming in in double-digit ownership. And for a 5-on-5 line, they're not creating an absolute ton, 2.6 expected goals. They're scoring 3.5 actual goals. And it's a decent 5-on-5 matchup because as good as, Kulik line is offensively, they definitely trade chances. That is a very high event line. Buffalo, not the best defensive team. Their penalty kill isn't anything to be feared. I don't mind Boston one, really, but it's the ownership thing. I think, again, I do a Pastrnak one-off or like a Zaka Pastrnak 2-man. You can full stack like an MME. In single entry, I'm probably not getting there. I prefer the Buffalo side for $1,800 less and less ownership. So, I'm okay with Boston 1. I don't love them. Boston 2, I really like Boston 1 is really the only line that I have any interest on the Boston side. So basically it's both top lines. I don't mind the Quinn McLeod line as a filler.
Yeah, I'll start with Buffalo. I don't mind that Buffalo third line as a filler, just because, we'll get to Calgary later. Like you mentioned, there's a Calgary line in that price range that's carrying a ton of ownership. So if you need a cheap line in that price range, it's okay. But I think this is a case where if I'm playing Buffalo, I want to get the power play guys in my lineup. Boston's been a shaky team this season. I don't think there's anywhere where that's been more apparent than on the penalty kill. They're giving up the third most power play goals against per game on the season. Over the last 5 weeks, it's the 5th most. This penalty kill just has not improved this season. That's one of those reasons why I like to talk about full season stuff and then the last 5 or 6 weeks and then maybe the last month, just to see if things are changing at all. This isn't changing. It's not getting any better for Boston. And Brandon Carlo being a game time decision, if he's out, with McAvoy and Lindholm already missing, they're going to be out half their starting blue line and at least their 2 best defensive defensemen in Carlo and Lindholm. So it's kind of lining up to be a pretty good spot for a Buffalo power play that has gotten better under this current setup, with Zucker, on the top power play, with Peterka, with Tuck, with those guys, the power play has been better. And it's a pretty good power play spot considering how bad Boston's penalty kill has been. So I think if I'm playing Buffalo, I probably would go to the top line just because you do get Thompson and Peterka on the top power play unit. Yuri Kulik has been really good this year. If you look at his shot volume, it's been pretty good basically all season, and now he's getting more minutes. So the actual shots per game are climbing, which is obviously what really matters for DFS. Kulik and Tage Thompson together this year, only 80 minutes, so it's not a big sample yet, but 68 shot attempts, 3.5 expected goals, 4.6 actual goals. They've been good at 5-on-5. The power play's been better. And the thing is if you look, we'll talk about all the notable lines today, but if you look at the prices of the lines, between 15 and 18,000, there's only 7 or 8 lines across the entire slate. There's not a lot of mid-priced lines. And I think this would be one that I would target. So I do like Thompson, Peterka, and Kulik. On the Boston side, I get what you're saying about the Bruins. like the top line hasn't been generating as much as we'd like to see. David Pastrnak is also on a heater to end all heaters. You know what I mean? Like that guy's just been like, I'm pretty sure he leads the NHL in points since Christmas, so over like the last month plus. Just in his last 10 games, he has nine goals, 19 points, and over 4 shots per game. Like whatever Morgan Geekie gets for his next contract, he should probably give half of it to Pastrnak. He's really elevating everybody around him. There are no matchups on the Buffalo side I'm worried about. Whether they send out Cousins, whether they send out Thompson or McLeod, the Dahl and Byron pairing, the Owen Power pairing, like it doesn't matter. There is quite a bit of ownership on them, though, as you mentioned. 12.8%, the 13.7% top 2 stack makes them playable. I think they're fine in this game. I would probably hesitate to full stack Boston. If I do anything with Boston 1, it'd be like Pastrnak and someone. So like Pastrnak and Zacha, Pastrnak and Geekie, something like that, as opposed to just full stacking, because that entire line just revolves around him. So he would kind of have to elevate 2 guys to a DFS winning performance. It's a lot to ask, even for Pastrnak. I would probably just do like Pastrnak one-off is perfectly fine. Obviously, he's one of the best one-offs on the board here tonight. He has the 3rd highest projection of any player on the board, the 2nd highest of any winger. So Pasternak's a great one-off. I would probably pair him with like Geekie or Zacha, not both. The 2nd and 3rd lines from Boston really don't interest me much. But I think it's Buffalo 1 for me in this game, and then Boston 1, and then maybe Buffalo 3 if you do need a super cheap filler. But I want power play guys from the Sabres, so I think it's Buffalo 1 for me.
Yeah, I mean, Buffalo 3. I'm throwing in a basket if you're MMEing and you're trying to do some expensive stuff. You know what I mean? So I'm not running out to play them. Winnipeg Jets with a 3.3 total heading into Montreal. The Canadiens have a 2.7. Looks like it's going to be Hellebuck and Montembeault tonight. Josh Anderson wasn't at morning skate, but I don't think that really affects their matchups. Like, as long as Dvorak Gallagher are healthy.
The coach said no lineup changes, so I assume Anderson's going to be in.
Yeah, so like that line has been taking more shutdown roles of late. Like the top line still goes out some.
Yeah. I think that's pretty much come to an end now. That Anderson Gallagher Dvorak line is starting to get their absolute brains beat in,
which isn't surprising.
Exactly, which is why I think those top line matchups are really going to slow down.
Yeah, so like maybe they go out a little bit, maybe they do some. Spencer, knock yourself out while I'm doing my show here, but. Let's just bring him over here. So if that top line is going to go out against the Winnipeg top line, I actually don't mind the Montreal side here. Like the Winnipeg top line is, decent defensively. The biggest problem is Hellebuck, right? I don't really want to stack against Hellebuck. This line is 16,700, which really isn't bad. It's a little bit cheaper than the Buffalo side. The Buffalo line, I much prefer to play Buffalo here. But as Cliffy said, there really isn't much in the 15 to 17, 18K range. So in MME, if you're looking for some mid-range builds, I don't mind a little bit of Montreal 1 here. This is a decent power play spot. You can beat Winnipeg on the power play. It is still Hellebuck and net, who's been ridiculous. So I don't mind, if I'm making 20 lineups, I have 1 or 2 Patrick Laine one-offs. But for me, this is a Winnipeg 1 game. Whether they go out against the top line of Montreal or that 3rd line, it doesn't really matter. Montreal's improved defensively. They're still not anything to be feared. Their penalty kill has gotten better, but again, they take a ton of penalties, so they're still giving up the same amount of power play goals. And Winnipeg is a pretty power play heavy team, so I do really like Winnipeg 1 here. They're 20,500. They're coming in with 4.6% projected ownership. It's not much. So, of the expensive lines, we'll obviously have to talk about Colorado. We have to talk about Tampa. I have to talk about Carolina. But at 4.6% in a good power play matchup, I do really like Winnipeg 1 here. that second line is interesting, but the minutes could be a concern. An Ehlers one-off is fine. As we saw in their last game, Scheifele missed the power play and they moved Perfidi up. So he's the next man up, but he doesn't play a ton at 5-on-5. So it would be Winnipeg 1 for me and an Ehlers one-off, and maybe Montreal 1 in line A and MME.
Yeah. Montreal had a really good stretch for about 20 games where the team was improving, at least defensively. That's completely fallen apart lately. I was looking at just their last 10 games. Over Montreal's last 10 games, they're giving up more shots and expected goals per minute than the San Jose Sharks. That is not the company that you want to keep. They are bottom 10 by goals against. The goaltending's actually been really good, kept them in games. So that's why the goals against haven't been as bad at times, even though they have had some pretty bad games recently. What I do worry about is that 20 game stretch that they went on is far less representative of what happened in the first 20 games of the season when they were legitimately one of the worst defensive teams in the league. That's what makes me pretty interested in Winnipeg is if Montreal's still one of the most penalized teams in the NHL. Over the last 5 weeks, they're second only to Florida. Over the entire season, they're first, and by a fairly wide margin, by time shorthanded per game. So they give up a lot of power plays. If they're back to being that team they were through the first 6 to 8 weeks of the season, which was a bottom 3 team defensively at 5-on-5, this is probably the best matchup on the board. Now, you don't want to read too much into 10 games. You don't want to read too much into the 20 games before. Alex Carrier, him and Caden Gooley have certainly been at least around league average together. It's the second and third pairs that are just getting absolutely throttled. I kind of like Winnipeg 1 here. 20,500, 12.2%. They have the 4th highest top 2 stack of any line on the board. And of the lines that are 10% or higher by top 2 stack, they have the lowest projected ownership. So if you don't want to pay over $25K for Tampa Bay, that'll run. If you don't want to go play Colorado, I think this is a pretty good pivot, because if Montreal doesn't, suddenly turn around the trend that's been going on basically this entire month, like I said, this, considering the amount of penalties that they take and how bad they've been at 5-on-5 defensively, this is probably the best matchup on the board for any team. So I really do like Winnipeg 1 here. They have the best power play in the league. I think it was 2 power play goals in their last game. They're first by power play percentage, first by goals per minute on the power play. Montreal takes a ton of penalties. Top line's perfectly correlated. Seems like this is a good night to squeeze in Winnipeg 1. So I really do like Winnipeg 1. Feels bad leaving Ehlers off. So if you want to just power play stack, I honestly think that's okay. Just because Montreal does take so many penalties. If Winnipeg gets 3 or 4 power plays here tonight, the Canadiens are probably going to be in trouble. So I really, really do like Winnipeg 1 here. I don't have that much interest in their depth. They just don't get many minutes. Ehlers, Perfidi have been fine, but they've been really inconsistent when they play together. Honestly, I just think they're a bad match stylistically to play together. I wish that they just changed their depth lines, but that's neither here nor there. For me, this is a Winnipeg one game because Montreal just takes so many penalties, and that line's perfectly correlated, and the power play has been so good, and Montreal's been so bad lately defensively at 5-on-5 that I think everything's lining up for a good Winnipeg game. So Winnipeg 1 for me. On the Montreal side, I do think Montreal 1 is fine to play. Whatever defensive issues they have, that top line's still generating. You and I have mentioned it basically show after show for a couple weeks now that since they've been reunited in the middle of December, they've been much better offensively. Just their last 10 games, 3.7 expected goals, 4.7 actual goals per 60 minutes. Cole Caulfield, over 3.5 shots per game over his last 20 games. So they are generating. I don't mind playing Montreal 1 here. But would I rather play Montreal 1 against a Winnipeg team that doesn't take a ton of penalties with Connor Hellebuck in net, or would I rather play Winnipeg 1 against a Montreal team that takes a ton of penalties with Sam Montembeault in net? I think that's a pretty easy answer. So Winnipeg 1, then Montreal 1. Then if you want a one-off line A or one-off, like a Brendan Gallagher, if you need a cheap guy or something like that, I guess that's okay. But for me, this is a game about the top lines, just like the game before. I much prefer Winnipeg to Montreal.
Yep. Chicago Blackhawks with a 2.4 total heading into Tampa Bay. The Lightning have a 4.1 total. Not surprising, that is the highest on the night. Tampa going Kucherov, Point, Gensel, Hagel, Cirelli, Geeky. Chicago going Bedard, Bertuzzi, Nazar, Teravainen, Dickinson, Mikheyev. So Tampa at home, funnily enough, they'll send out Cirelli, Hagel against top comp. So they're going to send out Kucherov, Point, Gensel against the Dickinson line. Not that that's anything to be feared anymore with Teravainen and Mikheyev there. They haven't been, a Dickinson line of old. They're still decent, but nothing to be feared. The issue is, do you want to spend over $25,000 on Tampa Bay here? For a couple of reasons. One, there's Colorado, there's Winnipeg we just talked about, there's Carolina, there's some other lines in that range. Two, Chicago has a decent penalty kill, decent enough that you hope that they don't give up 3 power play goals. And two, Hagel, Cirelli are in an unbelievable 5-on-5 spot. That Bedard, Bertuzzi, and Nazar line is absolute ass cheeks defensively. So I don't really want to spend $25,000 on a line here in not the best power play spot and not the best 5-on-5 spot. It's not a bad one, but there are way better 5-on-5 matchups in this game. If you want to spend up, that's fine. They have a 39.3% top 2 stack, 18.4% projected ownership. If anything for me on that top line, I'm just one-offing Kucherov and calling it a day. Similar to a Pasternak type deal. It's they're fine as one-offs. But for me, I prefer Hagel, Cirelli, Geeky at 15,800 coming in at 7% projected ownership. You can do what you want with Geeky, but they generally have very, very good numbers with Connor Geeky. They're going to get that Bedard, Bertuzzi, Nazar matchup, which has been atrocious defensively. So that's, it's Hagel isn't on the top power play unit anymore, which sucks. But again, it's not the best power play matchup, and Hagel still plays 20-plus minutes. So Tampa 2 for me. Tampa 1's fine. It's just not something I'm going to do in single entry. Nikita Kucherov one-off, always in play. On the Chicago side, I'm not really interested in full stacking anything. I'm out on the Bedard line because that 5-on-5 matchup sucks. Honestly, my favorite line would be Teravainen, Dickinson, Mikheyev, and I'm sure as shit I'm not full stacking them. I guess a one-off Teravainen is fine. He's running hotter than the sun the past month, but he's cheap enough on the top power play. But again, I'm not focusing on Chicago here tonight.
Yeah, this is interesting because these two teams just played was it Friday, so 4 days ago or whatever it was, and Tampa Bay was basically sleepwalking through the first 2 periods. You could kind of tell that they really I went back and watched some of the highlights because I was out that night. Some of the highlights from each of the periods, and you could tell Tampa Bay was just kind of checked out for that game. And then they turned it on in the third period and eventually ended up winning in overtime. If Tampa Bay brought their A game and played to their full capability, they should just absolutely just lay waste to Chicago here tonight. I do worry that they kind of have a performance like they did against Friday, which is they realize they're playing a bottom 3 team in the league, maybe the worst team in the league. And they just kind of sleepwalk through most of the game and do just enough to win. That's what kind of concerns me. By the same token, Nikita Kucherov is the highest projected player on the board here tonight, and it's honestly not super close. He's about a 1.5 ahead of Nathan McKinnon. Nearly 2 full points or over 2 full points ahead of David Pasternak, who's the next closest winger. So obviously with the high total, he's been playing his last 5 games. He's averaged 24 minutes a game. They're just giving Kucherov as much ice time as they can. I think he makes a great one-off. Full stacking the top line, I'm not going to say don't do it. Like, that top line has a 39% top two stack percentage. No other line is 20% or higher. The next closest is Colorado. We'll get to them in a bit. So I'm not going to say don't play them, but if I can save $5K, nearly $5K, and go play Winnipeg, who I think is in an equally good matchup against Montreal, albeit on the road, probably just go play Winnipeg instead, and then just upgrade my secondary stack or upgrade my defenseman or something like that. So, I do worry. Like, I think ice time concerns are kind of legit too. Like, they broke up this line a while ago for a reason, is because they're starting to get pretty bad defensively, and Gensel and Point under 19 minutes per game over their last 5 games, while Kucherov has been skating 24. So they've basically been moving Kucherov all around the lineup and treating Point and Gensel as if they're Hagel and Cirelli. And that's concerning when you consider that this line is over 25K. So one off Kucherov, probably the best play on the slate as an individual player. Full stacking Tampa 1, I'm not sure I'm there. Kind of with you. I think Tampa 2 is where my interest is. Tampa's not drawing a ton of power plays lately. Chicago does have a good penalty kill. It's the one thing that they can boast. Hagel and Cirelli and Geeky, like, their problems lately have been shooting percentage related. 69 shot attempts, 2.8 expected goals, but shooting under 5% over their last 20 games. Like, that'll correct itself eventually. I do like that line. I think it's nice, mid-price line if you want to put in. Like I said, I think Kucherov is the best one-off play on the slate. But if I'm full stacking anything, it's probably Tampa 2. Honestly, I think you can even just do like Cirelli, Hagel, and Kucherov if you want. Just the way that they run their power play units, Kucherov has been playing both halves, so they're technically correlated on the power play anyway. But I think Kucherov one-off is just basically what I have the absolute most interest in. On the Chicago side, like, definitely not playing the second and third lines. Like, Tampa Bay does have a pretty good penalty kill, and Chicago's been drawing a lot of their value from the power play. So, like, if they don't get there on the power play, Tampa doesn't take a ton of penalties. I guess the top line is fine, but I'm not super interested in full stacking Chicago. Like, I think some cheap one-offs are okay, even going down to Ryan Donato because he's on the power play or whatever. I think that's fine. I don't have any interest in Chicago here. The top line's getting run over. The second line can't generate anything. And I'm certainly not playing Chicago 3 and Chicago 4 on the road on an 8-game slate. You're muted.
Carolina Hurricanes with a 3.1 total heading into Madison Square Garden. The Rangers have a 2.8. This is an interesting game because obviously Mikko Rantanen on the top line with Carolina isn't a huge sample. Aho and Blake have played 80 minutes together this season. They've been decent. Obviously, adding Mikko Rantanen is going to help offensively. I don't think that's going to help at all defensively. So for that reason, I actually don't mind Panarin, Trocheck, Lafreniere here at 17.9, 4.5% projected ownership. Like, we saw them randomly go up to almost a little bit over 20,000 last week. Now they're back down to 17.9. Obviously, Lafreniere isn't on the top power play anymore, but this line has been good all season. They're over a 500 minute sample, 3.1 expected goals per 60, 3.5 actual. Carolina obviously sacrificing defense for offense here with this trade. I don't mind the Rangers top line here. Am I going to get there in single entry? I'm not sure because the Carolina still has an elite penalty kill. They get their minutes, so at 17.9, I think you can take a chance. If they're like 19.6, over 20,000, I'd say probably not. But at that price and the lack of options in that range, I think they're fine. I don't have a ton of interest in the depth of the Rangers here. I guess you could play Mika Smith Cooley at 11.7, but like they have, they're generating a ton, but they couldn't hit water if they fell out of the boat in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So, like, you could take a stab, but I'm not interested in it. What to do with Carolina, one, is pretty interesting here because, one, it's Igor Shesterkin in net, but two, the Rangers have been taking a fair bit of penalties recently. Their penalty kill is good because Igor's been good, but no one's really playing them. They're coming in at 3.1% projected ownership. They're more of like a speculative play, right? Because this is their second game together. They were mixing and matching the lines, trying to figure out some good combinations. The Rangers have improved defensively since their 6-week stretch where they were abysmal. That Borgen pairing has been decent. So, I don't mind Carolina one, but at that price, I'm probably just going to go up to Winnipeg. You know what I mean? I think you can take a speculative stab on them in MME. In single entry, it's a little bit more of a tough sell. I think for me, I'm going to go back to the Stahl Jarvis Martinook line. It's like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. You know what I mean? They would be a filler that I'd be interested in. Jarvis plays a ton. He's on the top power play, et cetera, et cetera. Stahl's having a great season. So for me, it would be Rangers 1, Carolina 3.
Yeah, I don't hate playing Rangers 1 here just because of their price. They're back, like you said, they're back down to 17,900. They're coming in with positive leverage, so a higher top 2 stack. Then ownership, Panarin and Trocheck are likely to be around 20 minutes. Lafreniere is going to get less because he's off the power play now, but he's still like 17, 18 minutes. So they're getting good ice time. Again, there's not a ton of options in that price range. But one of the reasons why I don't really like them is, as you mentioned, the Carolina penalty kill. Just over the last 5 weeks, tied for the third fewest power play goals against per game. Over the course of the entire season, second fewest power play goals against per game. The Rangers, they typically do derive a lot of their value, DFS value, the top guys, as a lot of top players do in the league. It's a power play driven league. They derive a lot of their value from the power play. So, like, if they don't get there on the power play, I have my concerns. So I don't hate the idea of playing the Rangers at top line. As you said, they've been largely good all season. There's a little blip there in like December, but that kind of applied to basically like the whole team. Otherwise, they've been really good. I think I'd probably rather go play the Buffalo top line, but I would have them like ahead of Montreal, certainly. So I still prefer Buffalo. I think Rangers 1 is fine. This is a case I'll make for the Rangers' second line of Zibanejad, Smith, and Cooley, and even the third line to an extent, is that one thing that Pyotr Kochetkov does for Carolina. I think it's Freddie Anderson starting, so we don't have the same sample. But one thing I guess we'll just say Carolina defensemen are struggling with are clearing rebounds from the front of the net. And guys like Will Cooley and Chris Kreider basically just live in front of the net. So, like, if they get on the board, they bang home a Zibanejad shot, they bang home like a Kaliev shot, something like that. I would probably go Zibanejad, Smith, and Cooley just because I think they'll get more ice time. You get power play time in there. Will Cooley, even though he doesn't get a ton of time, he's still over 2 shots per game over his last 10 games. So he's still getting involved offensively. I think they're a decent filler if you need them here tonight. Zibanejad, Smith, and Cooley, especially going up. They'll probably get a fair amount against the Sebastian Aho line. Like you said, Rantanen's not going to make them better defensively. So I don't mind Rangers 2 as a filler. They're not my favorite on the night, but I do think that there is a path where they can get a goal or 2 against Anderson here if that Carolina defense doesn't clear out the front of the net. On the Carolina side, I'm kind of torn here. One, because there's no ownership on that top line. And assuming Jack Roslovic doesn't go tonight, Carolina's going to run an 11-7 lineup. And 11-7 means more ice time for the top guys. 11 forward, 7 defensemen means more ice time for the top guys. So like Aho over 20 minutes, Rantanen probably pushing 20. Here's the thing with Mikko Rantanen, though. He's still priced as if he's playing 23 minutes a game on the top line and top power play unit in Colorado, as opposed to playing 18 to 19 minutes a game on the top line and top power play unit in Carolina. Those are not the same thing. You just have to look at his ice time in the first game. Rantanen, it was an overtime game, mind you, against the Islanders, and he played under 19 minutes. The 3 games before that for Colorado, 23 and a half, 20 and a half, 27. So, like, getting that amount of minutes next to Nathan MacKinnon is not the same thing as 19 minutes next to Sebastian Aho. Maybe he gets 20 because they're going with 11 forwards here tonight, but he's still being priced as if he's in Colorado. Honestly, he should probably be about $1,500 cheaper, $2,000 cheaper maybe than he is. If we're pricing him for playing 18 to 19 minutes a game as opposed to 23 plus. So that's kind of why I'm out on Carolina, is like the ownership is fine. I'm not worried about any of the matchups in particular. Blake and Aho have generally been good together. I just think Rantanen is wildly overpriced, and that means I think the entire line is wildly overpriced. So I'm out on Carolina 1. The one I'm interested in is Jarvis, Stahl, and Martinook. 12.5K, 1.5% top 2 stack, 1.8% ownership, 16 to 18 minutes a game, 3.3 expected goals, 2.7 actual goals per 60. Seth Jarvis, 27 shots over his last 10 games. They get good ice time. Not worried about any of the matchups from the Rangers side. I think Carolina 3, that Jarvis, Stahl, Martinook line, or at least the 2-man off of it, Jarvis plus one of the other guys, is one of those filler type things you can do here tonight. So I think this is a game where I'm a little bit more interested in the depth than the top lines.
For sure. Colorado Avalanche with a 3 total heading into New York or into Long Island. We all know how much that sucks. The Islanders have a 2.6 total. Colorado going McKinnon, Netchus, Drouin, Colton, Drury, Wood, Lehkonen, Middlestat, Parsinen. Islanders going Horvat, Barzal, Lee, Nelson, Palmieri, Duclair. So this is 3 and 4 on the road for Colorado. Now, they did play a day game on Sunday, so they got an extra half day off, I guess. They already have, this top line already has a 31-minute sample in 2 games at 5-on-5.
Like, hold on. I mentioned this on one of the social media channels. I forget what it was, but Martin Necas's first game, his very first game for Colorado, he skated over 25 minutes. It was his highest regular season ice time of his career. He's played over 400 games, and his very first game with Colorado was the highest. That's what I meant about Rantanen.
Yeah.
It's like, you know what I mean? The ice time matters a lot.
Yeah, and Netchus is only $6,600. He's $1,900 cheaper than Rantanen. Netchus is definitely going to play more here tonight. On Sunday, Netchus led the team in ice time. McKinnon didn't even play 20 minutes in that game. They were trying to limit his ice time. That is the first time he's been under 20 minutes in a long time.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing. Sorry to cut you off. I just want to mention real quick. It's like, ideally, Colorado doesn't want to play Nathan MacKinnon 24 minutes a game in January regular season games, right? Ideally, they'd like to play him 19 to 20 minutes. They just couldn't because the rest of the lineup has been trash. Now, adding Necas and, adding Drury, theoretically, Necas replaces Rantanen. Drury actually gives them, like, the guys on the 4th line now, like Logan O'Connor and Kiviranta or whatever, at times they're on the 2nd line for Colorado this year. Like, theoretically, they should be deeper now. And so I wonder about ice time and conserving ice time because, like I said, they don't want to play MacKinnon 24 minutes a game at this stage of the season. They just kind of have to.
Yeah, I mean, like, he was on a back-to-back, played just under 20. I would imagine tonight, if they try to limit him, he'll be 21, 22, something like that.
Yeah.
And Netchus, these are some of the fastest, best possession players in the league, and you're getting them at like a $1,500 discount. This top line is 21,300, 19.3% top 2 stack, 11.5% projected ownership. Now, the Islanders don't take a ton of penalties, but they have, I think it's one of the worst, either the worst or the second worst penalty kill percentage in the league. They have been decent of late, going 16 for the last 18, but that percentage is still included on how bad they are. This Colorado power play, you take out Rand and add Netchus, I'm not sure it misses a beat. Now, Rantanen was more of a one-timer threat, but Netchus, is an all-around player. He could do whatever he needs to. I do really like Colorado one here. He's reading himself a book. The matchup against the Horvat line isn't the best one, but again, Nathan McKinnon lines are matchup proof. These are two of the fastest skaters in the league, two of the best zone entry players in the league. I'm in on Colorado 1 here. If you're worried about the lack of power play and not the best 5-on-5, like Winnipeg is right there. But again, it's McKinnon. You know they're going to at least play 20, 21 minutes here tonight. They're fully correlated. So that's the line I'm interested in Colorado. I'm not interested in the Middlestat line. They've, Casey Middlestat's had a pretty bad season. Lehkonen is fine, I guess, but it's hard to stack Colorado without McKinnon. That's really about it on the Colorado side. On the Islanders side, I see this Islanders top line coming in at 7.5% projected ownership. Usually there's pretty heavy chalk, but they're getting really pricey now at 18,500. Colorado's been a decent defensive team. Now, the last few games, they've been pretty leaky from a goaltender standpoint, not so much from a defensive standpoint. That happens. If you want to play the Islanders here, that's fine. But at 18.5, I'm probably going to go play that Buffalo line for cheaper. We'll talk about Vegas in a little bit. The Rangers top lines there. There's other lines in that range that I kind of prefer. I almost never stack the Islanders as it is. They're usually chalk. Now they have positive leverage. They're too expensive for my taste. I think they're fine, but it's not something I'm looking to prioritize.
Yeah. It's an interesting power play penalty kill matchup because the Islanders do have a bad penalty kill. Now it's been getting better, but it's largely just been save percentage driven. It's not because they're limiting a ton of shots or whatever. But the Islanders don't take a ton of penalties, and Colorado's power play had been struggling this year. Now, they were scoring largely because they get so much ice time, and I think that's another thing to note here with Rantanen and Natchez is that Colorado's top power play guys, like if Natchez is attached to McKinnon on the power play, he's going to get 80-85% of the power play time, whereas in Carolina it was like 70%, maybe even a little less. So larger share of the power play role as well. But some of their playmaking numbers, their passing data from a website called All Three Zones that I subscribe to, had trailed off quite a bit compared to last year. Maybe that's why. Maybe that figured into the Rantanen thing is that they try to want to get a little bit more out of their power play and see if Natchez can juice it up a little bit. But I was looking at McKinnon's numbers over the last 2.5 seasons without Rantanen next to him. Like that's all I was interested in. Over the last 2.5 seasons without Mikko Rantanen, 3.1 expected goals, 4.5 actual goals per 60 at 5-on-5. Like it doesn't matter who he plays with. He can if he gets good wingers and he has good wingers, he can elevate anybody. Like it's a fine matchup for Colorado, but it's like, would I rather play Colorado on the road against the Islanders, a team that doesn't really take very many penalties, or would I rather play Winnipeg on the road against Montreal, a team that takes the most penalties in the league? Like that's just the differentiator for me. I have nothing against playing Colorado 1 here. I have them just behind Winnipeg. If you look at the top two stacks of those two lines, Colorado is ahead. I got to think a lot of that is just ice time because McKinnon typically plays a ton. But I think considering the sub 5% ownership on Winnipeg, I would just lean in that direction. But I have nothing against playing Colorado here. If their power play improves with Natchez, this is basically a brand new line again. So no issue with Colorado 1. I'm not interested in Colorado 2. Colorado 3 is the one that is interesting a little bit to me because once you get past that top line matchup, there's nothing on the Islanders side that I'm particularly worried about. Colton, he's gone kind of cold this year. It's typically not a bad goal scorer at 5-on-5. Jack Drury is a good defensive center. I don't know about his offensive upside, but he's a good defensive center. Miles Wood shoots the puck, and he's really good on zone entries. Like that strikes me as a third line that can work well together. So if you're playing Tampa Bay and you need a super cheap stack, I think Colorado 3 is one that I would at least consider. But Colorado one is the line that I have the most interest in. On the Islanders side, I think I agree with you on the Islanders top line. I just think they're a little bit too expensive at 18,500 because there's not much power play upside to them, right? Like that's the issue. Is like, yeah, maybe they score 2 goals at even strength, and then Bo Horvat pops an empty netter, and then you're on your way. Like, you know, those things do happen, but there's not a lot of power play upside to them. And this is a power play league. You to be like a high end offensive player, or at least have high end offensive production, you need to be good on the power play. The Islanders just aren't. Colorado typically has a pretty good penalty kill. Colorado also doesn't take a lot of penalties. So not really in so much on the Islanders. I think there are one-off guys you can play. Like, you know, I know Anthony Duclair, he's getting reasonable minutes. He's only 4K. Like that would be fine. You want a one-off Matt Barzal just because he gets good ice time. And he has been shooting the puck a little bit, 2.5 shots per game over his last time. Like that's fine. Like Bo Horvat one off, that's fine. But like full stacking, I'm out on the Islanders. If I'm stacking anything in this game, Colorado won.
Yep. Washington Capitals with a 2.9 total heading into Calgary. The Flames have a 2.6. Since Bobby Boom has been talking about revenge narratives, Logan Thompson homecoming narrative. He's from the area. Freshly inked new contract for him. Washington going Ovechkin, Strome, McMichael. Also, Logan Thompson should be the starting goalie for the Canadiens Four Nations Cup. He's not even on the team. Neither here nor there. Second line, Wilson, Dubois, Protas. Calgary going Kadri, Huberdeau, Peltier. Coleman, Backlund, Coronado, Sharangovich, Pospisil, Kuzmenko. Okay. Elephant in the room is Coleman, Backlund, Coronado, 10,500. 3.3% top 2 stacks, 16.2% projected ownership. I will not be doing that. Now, if you do want to do that, they will be matched up against Strome, Ovechkin, McMichael, which has been putrid defensively. Awful. Like Chicago Blackhawks, awful. Like that Bedard line, awful. Like Sharks, awful. The thing is, like Logan Thompson is outside of Hellebuck, he's probably having the best season of any goalie in the league. So at 16% ownership, banking on a goalie to have a bad game is not something I'm willing to do. It's a great 5-on-5 matchup. I get it. If you want to do it with the price, the minutes, the matchup, I get it. I won't be doing it in single entry. In MME, you know, if I was making 150 or whatever it was, I'd have a decision. I'd probably come in a little bit under the field. I don't think I would go way over the field on a line that, you know, generally doesn't outscore their expected goals because of shooting percentage issues. So probably under the field. I get it, though. Like 10,500, great 5-on-5 matchup. You're just running into one of the best goalies in the league. Don't have a ton of interest in Kadri, Huberdeau, Peltier. Like, they've been fine. But, you know, again, I don't love it. If anything, like a Sharangovich one-off or something like that, just because there's not a lot of ownership, a two-man with Kuzmenko or something. But I'm not super high on the Flames here. Also not super high on the Washington Capitals. It is Dustin Wolf starting. The Ovechkin, Strome, McMichael line has been pretty brutal. They are getting that Coleman-Backlund matchup, which is not ideal. So I'm out on Strome, Ovechkin. I'm in on Wilson, Dubois, Protas. They've been generally pretty good this season. And since the Flames flip-flop Pospisil and Peltier, that Kadri line has been pretty bad defensively. So if anything, I'll play Wilson, Dubois, Protas. I don't particularly love stacking against Dustin Wolf, but at 13,900 at 2.8% projected, that's a filler line, just maybe a little bit more expensive than the filler line that you can fit with. You probably could fit them with Winnipeg if you wanted to. So that's probably my favorite line in this game. I understand the appeal to back on Coleman Coronado. I just can't do it in single entry at that ownership.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have to go super long here. I'm not stacking a 16% owned line on an 8-game slate against the second best goalie in the league. And it's not only that. Washington is a top 3 penalty killing team in the league this season. Like, it's them, Carolina, and Dallas are basically in a tier of their own. So not only are you stacking against the 1B to Connor Hellebuck's 1A for goaltenders in the league this season. You're stacking against a top 3 penalty kill, and you're doing it at wild chalk. Like, that just feels like a fairly easy fade. I say that, welcome to everybody that gets the Matt Coronado hat trick tonight now. That's just how those things go. But I'm out on Calgary. If you want to play the Kadri Huberdeau Pelche line, like, go ahead. But that Kadri Huberdeau line's been on a little bit of a decline lately. There's a reason why they moved Pelche up there. It's because the line hadn't necessarily been playing that well. I'm just out. There's just too much ownership on the Calgary side. I'll let other people play it. And, it's another one of those nights. If the Flames beat me, then the Flames beat me. But I'm out on Calgary. I agree with you on the Caps. It's Wilson Dubois and Protas that I have interest in. Strome and Ovechkin, they've been bad defensively all season. Logan Thompson has bailed them out. They haven't been good defensively with Connor McMichael there, and they've just not been generating a whole lot either. With McMichael in the top line, 51 shot attempts, 2.1 expected goals, 1.4 actual goals per 60 minutes. Low key, they haven't done a lot since Ovechkin returned a month ago. Like, I think Ovechkin has 3 goals in the last month, and 2 of them are in an empty net. Or is it 1 empty net, 1 overtime, something like that? Like, it's just not, they're just not, like, Connor McMichael hasn't been doing anything for like 2 months now. So just out on that line. Wilson Dubois and Protas is where I am. 170 minutes together this season, 2.9 expected goals, 4.3 actual goals per 60 minutes. They're cheap enough to be filler status. They're not getting a ton of ownership. I think they get the better matchup, avoiding Backlund Coleman Coronado here. I'm not a big fan of stacking against Dustin Wolf, but in that price range, like, if you're looking in the 13K price range, 13 to 15K, you're looking at like Winnipeg 2, something from Seattle, something on the Calgary side, like the Islanders second line. I would probably rather play the Jordan Staal, Jordan Martinook, Seth Jarvis line, which is a little bit cheaper. But I think if you need a line in that price range, Washington 2 would be the one I would play after that Carolina line.
Yeah. Dallas Stars with a 2.9 total heading into Vegas. The Golden Knights have a 3 total. Vegas going Eichel, Stone, Barbashev, Hurdle, Dorofeyev, Olofsson. Dallas going Robertson, Johnston, Dodonov, Ben, Duchesne, Bork, Hintz, Stankov, and Steele. Now, I feel like this is going to be a very good actual game. From a DFS standpoint, I'm not so sure. Like, I'm fine with Vegas one here. Eichel, Stone, Barbashev. They just, they've been okay, and they're only $1,400 cheaper than Winnipeg. So at that point, I'm just going to go play Winnipeg for a higher top 2 and less ownership. So, they're fine. They're an MME play for me. The Vegas line that I have the most interest in is Hurdle, Dorofeyev, Olofsson at 14,900, 4.5% projected ownership. Now, this isn't a very good power play spot. Dallas generally has an elite penalty kill, and they have both Lyubushkin and Dumba in the lineup. They don't do anything offensively, but that gives them 3 good defensive pairs. These lines for Dallas outside of the Johnston line have generally been really good defensively. I'm fine with Hurdle, Dorofeyev, Olofsson because of their price and the role that they play, but I'm not prioritizing Vegas. On the flip side, like, I'm not really prioritizing Dallas either. I think the line that I'd be most interested in is Ben, Duchesne, Bork at 12.4. Just because it's price driven, 3.8% projected ownership. Like, you want to go play Robertson, Johnston, Dodonov, like, go ahead. But that Duchesne, Ben, Bork line has generally been just as good offensively, and they're $4,000 cheaper with the same amount of ownership. I see there's a lot of ownership on Hintz, Stankov, and Steele, 7.2% projected. So it's probably both second lines for me, but I don't think this is going to be a great DFS game.
Yeah, here's what worries me about Vegas. They beat Florida 4-1 on the weekend. It was on Sunday night. They moved Mark Stone off the top line by the end of the second period, and he didn't get a shift with Jack Eichel at even strength again until Florida was playing with the empty net, and they had Stone and Eichel on.
Yeah.
That line with Barbashev that was so great through the first 6 weeks of the season or whatever it was, Hasn't done dick since Barbashev came back. 1.4 goals per 60 minutes for the top line at 5-on-5 since Barbashev returned. I think that's kind of why they moved a Stone off. It's because they haven't been generating a ton. 2.7 expected goals. It's good. It's not elite. It's not high end or anything. And they haven't been scoring. And I worry that, Dallas goes up 1-0 and all of a sudden the top line is completely nuked by the middle of the first period. Like that, I think that's a legit concern. Like Alex Holtz played the third period with Jack Eichel the other night. So they are clearly not happy with the way the top line has been playing, or at least not producing. So I do worry about that. So for that reason, at that price, I think I agree with you. I would just pay up a little bit and go play Winnipeg, where I feel pretty confident that they're going to stay together. And if they don't, at the very least, they'll be correlated on the power play, whereas Barbashev doesn't get power play time, at least not on the top power play unit. So again, it's one of those lines. It's like Colorado, where I don't have anything against the line in particular. Also think it's a pretty bad matchup. Like Dallas is generally good at 5-on-5, and they do have an elite penalty kill. Like I said in that segment on Washington, it's Washington, Carolina, and Dallas, and it's tier of their own for penalty kills this season. Now the Vegas power play has been elite in this current setup with Dorofeyev and Hertl, but in that case, I just go play Vegas too. Dorofeyev, Hertl, and Olofsson, 14,900. They haven't been elite, but carrying the play by expected goals, 3.3 actual goals per 60. Dorofeyev has 34 shots in his last 10 games. He's averaging 3 shots per game on the season this year. I do like Vegas too here. It's probably the only line I have interest in on the Vegas side. On the Dallas side, if anything, I would probably go to Robertson, Johnston, and Dodonov, just because we do have a sample of them playing well enough. 110 minutes, 2.7 goals per 60. Johnston not shooting as much of late, about 2 shots per game in his last 15 games. But Robertson, obviously, his offense has picked up lately. If you need a filler, I think Ben Duchesne and Bork is where I would go. 62 shot attempts, 3.4 expected goals together this season. Ben and Duchesne have generally been fine. Ben and Duchesne are also on the top power play unit. So that's a filler line. We get 2 out of the 3 guys on top power play. So I think they're, considering how cheap they are, that they're $4,000 more expensive. It's Dallas too that I have the most interest in, Ben, Duchesne, and Bork. So I think this is a game where it's both second lines appeal to me both more than both top lines, considering other options in that price range. And that, honestly, for Vegas's power play, this is a pretty bad matchup.
Yeah. Anaheim Ducks with a 2.9 total. Heading into Seattle, the Kraken have a 3.1. Seattle was in Edmonton last night. They lost with Joey Decord starting, so it's going to be Philip Grubauer in net tonight. Anaheim going Vetrano, Terry Strome, McTavish, Gauthier, Fabry, Zegras, Kaloran, Carlson. Seattle status quo as far as I know. Schwartz, Beniers, Kakko, McCann, Wright, Tolvanen, Bjorkstrand, Stevenson, Burakovsky. On the Seattle side, I'm probably out on the Stevenson line. I'm probably out on the right line. The only line of interest for me would be Schwartz, Beniers, Kakko. This is a really good 5-on-5 matchup. There isn't any matchups that concern me coming back from the Ducks side. The Ducks goalies have generally been good. This is a good power play matchup. Seattle's penalty kill isn't great, but that Dunn unit has been pretty good for Seattle. So I'm okay with Schwartz, Beniers, Kakko at 7.1%, but I don't think I'm going to prioritize them. My interest is more on the Ducks side. Vetrano, Terry Strome, 15,100, 8.5%. They are very good offensively. 3.3 expected goals per 63 actual in a 400-minute sample. They're fully correlated on their power play unit. Now, Seattle doesn't take a lot of penalties. They're one of the lowest in the league, but they have trouble killing him. Not really concerned about it here because it is Grubauer net and he sucks. So if you want a mid-price line under 10%, I think this Ducks line makes a lot of sense. Also like this McTavish, Gauthier, Fabry line at 10,500. I'd much rather play them at 1.2% projected than the Backlund Coleman Coronado line at 17%. So it would be both top lines here, but I also like the McTavish line as a filler.
Yeah, I'll start on the Seattle side. I agree with you on the top line for Seattle. 2.6 expected goals, 3.6 actual goals for Schwartz, Beniers, and Kako. They've been really good at 5-on-5. The thing is they're getting ice time. It's something that we harped on earlier in the season with Seattle. It was like Chandler Stevenson was skating like 21 minutes a game, and then every other forward was between like 12 and 17 minutes. This entire top line over the last 5 games is between 18 and 20 minutes. They're not shooting a ton. At least Beniers isn't. Schwartz is fine. Schwartz and Beniers are on the same power play unit. Not that there's no power play unit in this game that's actually any good. But neither penalty kill is very good either. So you got to figure maybe one of them can break through. They do, 2 of the 3 guys on that line do get power play time together. I think Seattle 1 is fine to play. They're getting a little expensive at $14,200. Honestly, they're only $700 cheaper than that Vegas second line we just talked about. The Washington second line that we mentioned a little bit earlier, the Carolina third line is $1,700 cheaper. So I do think there are other options in that price range to turn to. They're fine here. It's another one of those, I don't have anything against them. It's a good matchup of 5-on-5. It's a good matchup for whatever power play that they can cobble together. But honestly, if I'm playing Seattle here tonight, I think more than anything, it'd be just looking for one-offs. I think a one-off Oliver Bjorkstrand makes sense. I think a one-off Eli Tolvanen or Jared McCann makes sense. A one-off Jaden Schwartz makes sense. Full stacking from Seattle. I think I'm kind of out on that. For me, and more on the Anaheim side, this is my concern with the Anaheim top line of Vetrano, Terry Strome, is that since Zegras came back, they've gone to pretty balanced ice time. If you look at the 3 games since Zegras came back, their top 10 forwards are all between 13 and a half and 17 and a half minutes. 3 weeks ago, the Terry line was getting 19 to 20 minutes a game. Now they're getting 17 and a half. That's what worries me a little bit. And if you're going to get more ice time, Zegras, Killorn, and Karlsson are going to get reasonable amounts of ice time, at least Zegras and Killorn will, I'll go with the cheaper guys that are also perfectly correlated. That line is $5,000 cheaper than Terry Strome and Vetrano. They're also perfectly correlated, and they're going to get at least two out of the 3 guys are going to get about the same amount of ice time, right? So for me, it's Zegras, Killorn, and Karlsson at $10,200. I think is one of the filler stacks I really do like here tonight. Like I said, they're perfectly correlated. They're $5,000 cheaper than Anaheim 1. Zegras and Killorn will probably play around 17 minutes. Zegras and Karlsson have been kind of fine together this year. 2.6 expected goals, 2.4 actual goals per 60. Those are about league average numbers. Honestly, and whenever you see offensive numbers around league average on Anaheim, kind of take it and run, because this is a team that hasn't scored a lot of goals this year. I think Zegras, Killorn, and Karlsson's my favorite line in this game. I don't mind the Kako line from the other side, but like I said, I think I'm more interested in one-offs from Seattle than outright stacking anything.
Yep. Let's talk about some defensemen here at the top of the board. The only one there are a couple over 6,000. Makar's 8,000. I think that's a decent price for him. Makar, Dahlin, Hedman, Theodore, Morrissey, Montour. I don't think I'll be spending up in this range here tonight. Hedman's fine, but it's not a great power play spot. Rasmus Dahlin would be the guy if you're not spending for Makar. So I think Makar, Dahlin, 1, 2. But after that, I'm probably in the mid-range or cheaper. What are you seeing?
Yeah. For the expensive guys, Victor Hedman leads by raw point totals. He's even ahead of Makar, who's $1,400 more expensive by the stochastic projections. Makar has a really bad point per dollar value. A lot of it is, I think, because the Islanders don't take a ton of penalties. The Colorado doesn't have a huge total either. I think Hedman's fine, but the thing is, Darren Radish, I think he's only 3,700, and he's getting good minutes. It just feels like an easy pivot away from a more expensive Hedman. I think if I play Makar, it's probably as a one-off. I'm not sure I stack him with Colorado. I do think the number of power play opportunities is a concern there. I'll mention Josh Morrissey. Oh, there goes Josh. I'll mention Josh Morrissey just because it is a great power play spot for Winnipeg. He doesn't typically stuff the stat sheet, but 6,300, really good power play spot. I think he's fine if you want to spend up. In the mid-price range, there aren't a lot of defensemen that I really like. Seth Jones is all the way down to 4,500. It's not a good matchup. Chicago's a bad team, but he plays a lot of minutes and can put up like 2 shots and 2 blocks per game. He puts up good peripherals for 4,500, so it is what it is. Jacob Chikrin, he's still shooting at least. So I think he's fine in that mid-price range, but there's not a lot there. For me, it's more about the cheaper guys. Like, the Islanders are missing half their defensemen. Like, Pulak is out. Noah Dobson is out. Mike Riley's still out. So, like, Tony DeAngelo played over 25 minutes the other game after Pulak got hurt. I don't think he plays 25 minutes here, but it seems pretty likely he clears 20 minutes, and he's running the top power play, so that matters. Darren Radish, I already mentioned. Rasmus Anderson is down to 3,900 for Calgary. Rasmus Anderson 2 months ago was 7,100. He's one of the better point per dollar values under 4K. So I think Anderson's in play. Noah Hannafin's all the way down to 3,500. It isn't a great matchup, but he's really cheap for 3,500. Lane Hudson is all the way down. I believe it's 3,200 for Montreal. Sorry, 3,400. He doesn't. He gets good ice time. He doesn't put up much for peripherals, so you're relying on point production. But at 3,400, an assist with a shot and a block in it, and you're basically kind of fine. So anything more than that, you're laughing. Adam Pelech probably going to get a lot of ice time for the Islanders, so I don't mind him. And Bowen Byram's on the top pair, playing with Rasmus Dahlin. They're pretty good together offensively. Boston might be missing half their blue line. I don't mind Byram if you don't want to pay up for Dahlin. Under 3K, Riker Evans is basically the number 2/number 3 defenseman for Seattle now, at least by ice time. Don't mind him. Ryan McDonough is in a good spot for Tampa Bay. Nikita Zadorov, with all the injuries Boston might have here tonight, he might get some good ice time. Braden Schneider is projecting well for the Rangers. Josh Manson, whenever Josh Manson is below 3K, he's at 2,900. I don't mind him tonight either. In goal, Logan Thompson, I think, makes a lot of sense. He has the second highest projection of any stochastic goalie here tonight at 8,300, just behind Vasilevsky. Obviously, Vasilevsky has a lot of shutout equity facing the Chicago Blackhawks at home here tonight. So, if you have the money for Vasilevsky, I don't hate it, but Logan Thompson near the top of the board. I also mentioned Mackenzie Blackwood. It's not like the Islanders typically can fill the net. So I think Mackenzie Blackwood, if you don't want to play Thompson or Vasilevsky, is perfectly fine amongst the expensive goalies. If you're looking for a cheaper option, Igor Shesterkin projects far ahead of everyone else. So if you want to play a cheaper goalie, Igor Shesterkin, 12.4 DK point projection for 7,400, best point per dollar value in that price range. Also don't mind Dustin Wolf. Washington has really had some trouble scoring. Some of their offensive metrics have really been taking a dive basically since Ovechkin got injured there in November. So it's been about 2 months that a lot of their offensive numbers haven't looked great. And we talked about how their top line has really been struggling. So I don't mind Wolf. Whoever gets the start for Anaheim tonight, whether it's Dostal, whether it's Gibson, I believe Dostal is confirmed. I don't mind him tonight either. So John Gibson would be a cheap goalie that I would consider. So the cheap goalies are Igor Shesterkin, Lucas Dostal, and Dustin Wolf. If you want to play Vasilevsky, he has a lot of shutout equity. Don't mind that. But the expensive goalies I'm looking towards are Logan Thompson and Mackenzie Blackwood. All right. We are out of here. Thank you very much for tuning in. Anybody taking part in that big spin contest on DK tonight, good luck. My hat trick pick against my very beloved Montreal Canadiens, I am going with Nikolai Ehlers. We're still not sure if we're going to do a show tomorrow. It's a short slate. They've been the contests haven't been great sometimes on Wednesdays, but as long as the contests are good, we will be back tomorrow. If they're not, then we won't. But for sure, we're going to be back Thursday. So if not Thursday, then we'll see you tomorrow. Good luck tonight, everybody. Hopefully somebody watching this can take down that spin.